Revelations that the former president and his administration used the mechanisms of government to pursue perceived enemies drew immediate comparisons to another disgraced former president, Richard Nixon, and his enemies lists. One rather infamous memo written by then White House counsel John Dean in 1971 succinctly explained the purpose of that list, quote, stated a bit more bluntly, how we can use the available federal machinery to screw our political enemies. I'm joined now by a veteran of the Watergate era, journalist and author and CNN political analyst, Carl Bernstein. Carl, there's a lot we still don't know about this. But look, you know, the parallels between the Nixon enemy list and what we are now seeing from the former Trump administration, how apt are they?
Well, they're apt to the extent that Nixon wanted to screw his political enemies, no question, and so did Donald Trump. But Trump's actions go much farther than Nixon's, and were much more grievous because Trump is really guilty of crimes against democracy. It's not just about screwing his enemies, it's about getting everything he wants for himself, for his own political ends, for his own financial gain, for his family. He would undermine the very basic premise of democracy, as would now a Republican Party that is in thrall to Donald Trump and these kinds of activities. There's a conspiracy, an ongoing conspiracy by Trump and those around him and the hierarchy of the Republican Party that is in thrall and obeisant to Donald Trump to undermine democracy. That's what this all fits together as.
To your point, there is another key difference between Nixon and Trump here, which is that in the Nixon era, there were Republicans.
That's exactly
right. Who stood up to Richard Nixon?
Not only stood up, Richard Nixon was about to be impeached and convicted in the Senate and forced to leave office. That's why he resigned. What do we have today? We have Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, who are co-conspirators of this attempt. We have an intent to undermine democracy. Look at what the Republicans are doing to keep people from voting, to suppress voting so that Donald Trump or his acolytes or this Republican Party that is an authoritarian, undemocratic, unrepublican party. What is the goal here? It is not to further democracy. It's to undermine it. And Trump's whole presidency is about crimes against democracy.
You see a through line between you know, this DOJ investigation, the foreign events, Rudy Giuliani, pressure in Ukraine,
Roger Stone, go through the whole list.
The voting, the undermining the elections. You see a through line there?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is all about doing Donald Trump's will against his enemies, for his political gain, for his financial gain. This is not Nixon. Nixon indeed wanted to screw his political enemies. Nixon indeed was, guilty of obstruction of justice, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a much larger notion of satisfying every will and whim, and a party in thrall to this that will not stop this president even now that he is out of office.
So where does it go?
We don't know where it goes, but what we do know is that there is no leadership in the Republican Party that is willing to say, except for Liz Cheney, except for Mitt Romney, a few more, it's not McConnell, it's not Kevin McCarthy. Look, they have laid down and the train is running over them. And the train is running over our democratic principles that have guided this country throughout our history. We have never had a political party that has tried to suppress votes such as we're seeing now. We had the Dixiecrats, we had segregationist Democrats who controlled and tried to keep black people from voting, but most of the party did not go along with that.
What can or should the current Justice Department under Merrick Garland do? What can or should the current President Joe Biden do about this? Because you don't think it's over. I mean, Donald Trump is the former president, but you don't think this effort is over.
No, I don't. It's obviously not over. All we have to do is listen to your show, Anderson, every night, and what we put on the air and what we read in the New York Times and the Washington Post. Look, what we ought to be doing as journalists, particularly, we need to find out everything that happened in the Trump presidency in terms of these crimes against democracy, including the pandemic, homicidal negligence by a president of the United States. That figures in this too. What was that homicidal negligence about and resulted in tens, hundreds of thousands of deaths? It was for his own political purposes. That's not Nixon. This is something far greater. And what the Congress of the United States, investigations, the Department of Justice, yes, but it's going to be the press to find out what indeed has happened to us, and this continuing line into the Republican Party today and this ongoing conspiracy of intent to undermine democracy.
Carl, we got about 25 seconds left. I want to bring it back to the beginning, at least where we were this week on it. I want your reaction when you read this story initially from the New York Times about the scope of this investigation.
Well, it's a fishing expedition. It is to find out sources of the leaks. Well, why weren't these people looking to find out what the hell happened with Russia? What was their interest so much about leaks? And they're after the enemies, they're going after Schiff, going after the Democrats who indeed led the Russia investigation. It's patently obvious. I think, we don't need much more of a roadmap.